Hey everyone, Conor here today at etrailer.com. Today we're going to be going over and showing you how to install the SumoSprings Solo Custom Helper Springs here on our 2009 Workhorse W-Series Chassis. So here's what our SumoSprings look like installed on the chassis of our RV. Just as a comparison here, you can see we have the factory Jounce springs beside it. Now the overall height will be similar between the two springs. The difference is going to be in the type of material used. Our factory springs here, as you can see, are also hollow, whereas our SumoSprings are actually solid. So in addition, the height is going to be the same, but one spring is going to be solid, the other is going to be hollow, and the material is actually going to be much different on the SumoSpring here. It's a much more innovative design. So SumoSprings are one of the more popular upgrades you can make to our RV to improve the overall handling and stability. Now, essentially, what our front ones do, they do sort of two different things. Number one, they're going to help us with body roll. So body roll occurs when we're being passed on the highway by a semi and we get that large gust of wind, or when we're making sharp, evasive maneuvers. The body on our RV is going to want to rotate and tilt side to side. Our SumoSprings, however, they're going to be connected to the axle and pushed up against the frame there, and they're going to prevent that body roll. They're going to prevent our RV from rocking side to side. Another thing it's going to help with is what's known as porpoising. And that's going to be that forward and back motion of our RV, whether we hit a hole in the road or we're going over some bumps. They're going to help absorb that shock more, making us feel more in control of our RV. So we mentioned that the SuperSprings were popular, and it's for good reason, because there are actually other options for the front suspension here on our motorhome. Those other options are airbags and timbrins. Airbags are sort of self-explanatory, but timbrins are essentially a replacement Jount spring. They're similar to the SumoSprings, but they're made of a much harsher material. So although they do provide more support, they're also going to decrease our ride quality. So in regards to airbags, which are another great option, the main difference between these and the SumoSprings is that the airbags are going to be adjustable. However, that does come with some disadvantages as well. That means that they're going to require maintenance. Our SumoSprings are completely maintenance-free, so once they're installed, we can forget about them. Whereas airbags, we'd have to come back frequently and adjust the pressure. So these particular SumoSprings here have a 1,500 pound capacity. Now we do have other options with different capacities as well, but this is really going to be based off the Gbwr of your motorhome. I would also like to point out that our SumoSprings here, they come with a lifetime warranty and they're made in the USA, so you know you're getting a quality product. So in regards to installation, these SumoSprings are actually pretty easy to install. We only have 2 bolts, one per side, in order to get the old ones out, and then again, 2 bolts, one per side, in order to get the new ones in. We don't have to do any drilling or modifications, and we can use the RV's landing gear to raise it up to give us some room to work. So let's go ahead now and jump into an installation. So the first step of our installation, we need to go ahead and shock the rear wheels, and then we're actually going to lift the front of our motorhome up. Now we need to lift the frame off of the axle so it hangs freely. If you have a set of landing gear on your motorhome, that's what we're going to be using. It's the easiest way. But once we have both of those things done, let's go ahead and crawl underneath. So if we take a look, once we get under our motorhome here, we're going to see on either side these yellow springs here. Now these are our factory Jount springs, and they need to come out in order for us to install our SumoSprings. Now it's kind of hard to see, but directly above the Jount spring, we're going to have a threaded stud and nut we need to remove so we can get the factory Jount spring out. It's going to be sort of on the inside pocket of our frame rail here. So now, once we're underneath our coach here, we're going to see our yellow factory Jount spring that we need to remove. In order to do that, we're actually just going to grab a hold of it here, and we're just going to rotate it to break free the nut. Once we do that, we're going to take a 5/8" socket and ratchet, and it's going to be pretty hard, but we're going to have a little passage here in our frame. We're going to need to sneak the wrench and socket through there because we're going to have a threaded stud going up through the center of our Jount spring with a nut on top. We need to slip that socket over the nut. Once we do so, we should be able to remove the Jount spring by simply turning it the rest of the way out. Once we get this one out, we'll simply repeat that same process on the other side. So now that we have the factory Jount spring out, here's just a little bit of a better shot to show you what that looks like and show you what we were doing inside the frame there. As you can see, we have a threaded rod through the center of the Jount spring and then a nut holding it on top. So we were essentially putting the socket on top of the nut inside the frame there and just turning the Jount spring to remove it. So again, we'll just go ahead and repeat that same process on the other side. So once we get our old Jounce bumpers out, we can go ahead and install our new SumoSprings. As you can see here, the design is going to be the same in that we have a threaded rod through the center and it's going to be secured with a flat washer and a lock nut. Except this time, we're going to be using a 1/2-inch socket and wrench in order to tighten this down. Now it's going to be kind of hard to see under there, so we're going to give you a little brief overview of how this goes in. There's going to be a hole in the frame, similar to how the old one was, that we're going to insert this up into, and then on top of the frame, inside that little pocket there, it's a really tight space, but we need to reach our hand in there, and we need to install the flat washer and the lock nut over the hole here, and then we can go ahead and tighten it down. We're going to take the 1/2-inch socket and wrench we have here, set it on the top there. The two frame rails are going to pin our wrench here and prevent it from moving. Then we can come on underneath, and we're actually going to twist it by hand to tighten it. So let's go ahead and do that now. So now that we're under the RV here, let's go ahead and get everything up into position. I'm going to use one hand to hold up on our Jounce spring and the other to install our hardware. Once we get our nut started, we'll come back with our socket and wrench here. We just need to get it over the nut there, and then we can turn it by hand below to tighten it. As you can see now, well, you can hear the ratchet turning. That means we are locked onto the lock nut, and we can tighten it below by just rotating it clockwise. We're going to do this till we get it all the way snug. The top flange on our spring should be mated up against the bottom of our frame. And then when we can't turn it anymore by hand, we know it's tight. There will be no further torquing required. And that'll do it today for our look and installation of the SumoSprings Solo Custom Helper Springs here on our 2009 Workhorse W-Series Chassis.